As many of you know, I lost my chief of staff to ALS, but before I had lost Steve Goldstein to ALS, I actually lost one of my best friend's mothers to ALS. And that's what first got me involved in the ALS Association and the education and preventative work that we continue to try and do each and every day. I now sit as a board member of the ALS Association of DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And let me just say that the great work that people do to continue to educate folks about the services that are provided for people who come down with ALS and allow them to live out the rest of their lives to the best of their abilities and capacities. We don't have to look far. We've seen on the news, many of you saw the heartwarming story of the young graduate whose mother has ALS, who couldn't attend a graduation, and so they held a graduation ceremony at their house in their backyard. These are the kinds of accommodations that many families continue to make each and every day, understanding that their loved ones are immunocompromised and can't leave the house in the midst of the global pandemic. And it's one in which I just ask, in a time in which there's so much turmoil, there's so much of back and forth about particular issues, take this day as a day of compassion. Take this day as a day of thanks that you may not have to experience the challenges of this horrible, debilitating disease. I saw it first and foremost as it took my chief of staff from an able-bodied person who led me ably throughout my political career to a man who needed me to help him to open up a soda and to lift a spoon of peas to his mouth. And each and every day, I stood by him, just like families and friends do each and every day. And now we have a good friend of ours, a person who has dedicated and sacrificed their time and life to the county, Jay Kenny, who is also with us today, who also is now challenged with this debilitating disease. I pray that no one you know or yourself ever come down with this disease. And I pray that one day we find a cure. We can do this just like we found a vaccine for COVID. We have to keep up the attention. We have to make sure that people understand that this is solvable. We have to understand what this does to people. And we have to commit ourselves to helping those who are experiencing ALS to make sure that they can live a better, more fruitful, fulfilling life and give their families and friends all of the support that they need. This weighs heavy on my heart, but I'm thankful for the dedicated people who continue each and every day, whether it's the scientists and the doctors, folks who are with ALS associations all across the world, for their dedication and support for families and friends, and for the individuals themselves living with ALS. So I ask you today to use this as a day of giving, as a day of solace, as a day of understanding that because we can live our lives and talk and smile and have conversations, that is not given to all of us. And we need to recognize that today. Thank you very much, Council President. I'll turn to Councilmember Katz.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Rice. And let me say before I start that you and your staff, when we can't have this presentation without thinking of Steve Goldstein and how dedicated he was to you and your office, but how dedicated your office was to him and his family. It truly was remarkable. I had heard of ALS, and I see my good friend Jay Kenny on as well, and we are praying that we're gonna find a cure as we go along, and we're gonna be in a better place. But I had always heard of ALS, but I had never had a very good friend, a person who I would see daily with it. And Steve Goldstein was that person. And he certainly, uh, he brought a smile to everybody's face before he had it. And he certainly brought one even during. I mean, you knew that he was struggling, but you didn't know he was struggling. He made everybody his priority, and so we think of Steve. We certainly commemorate Awareness Month, ALS Awareness Month, and we thank the ALS Association, the DC, Maryland, and Virginia chapter for its advocacy, its outreach, and service. ALS is a complicated, devastating disease. It's estimated that nationally, at least 16,000 people have the disease at any given time. And every 90 minutes, hear that statistic, and every 90 minutes, someone is diagnosed with the disease and someone else passes away from it. There is currently no cure for ALS. We're working on it. We're gonna get them there. We're all gonna dedicate ourselves to do that. So it's critically important to continually raise awareness and speak out about the need for further research and treatment. We challenge everyone who is hearing our voice to join the fight against ALS by advocating, donating, volunteering, and participating in an event. Everyone can take out their phones and go to webdc.alsa.org to learn how they can get involved. Get involved to help everyone suffering from ALS, people like our good friend Jay, who is fighting every day. Jay, I say this sincerely. I thank you for you being with us. I thank you for being our friend for so many years, and for your hope and fighting spirit. It's truly an inspiration to every person. And again, I thank the ALS Association for its hard work and dedication as they continue to provide support and services to those living with ALS and to their caregivers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to County Executive Elrich.
Thank you. Like all the rest of us, we all share this belief that we have to continue to fight to find a cure for this disease. It's 5,000 Americans will continue to get a diagnosis every year, and the global numbers are much higher. I grew up knowing that there was a disease called ALS, but I associated it with Lou Gehrig. And, I remember his tearful goodbye at Yankee Stadium and all that, but it was remote from us. And with Steve getting it while he was working in Craig's office, that was my first up close and personal look at what it did. And it was tough. And, Steve worked on through that for a very, very long time. And the challenges of not having a body that won't do, or having a body that won't do what your brain wants it to do, has got to be extraordinarily difficult. And so, we've all seen this terrible toll up close and personal. And we've watched how it progressively debilitates people. So, we are going to continue to support those who are fighting this disease. And the work of fundraising is critically important, as is increasing awareness about ALS. I mean, I think it's important that more people understand it and understand the importance of helping contribute to the work that's being done to find a cure or a treatment for this. So I just wanted to be here in solidarity with the rest of you, because, having seen this personal, this is more than just somebody else's story. It's a story of somebody we all know. And, and I appreciate Jay being here today as well. So thank you for giving me a couple moments here. And this is important that this work get done.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. County Executive. And I want to acknowledge Lynn Aronson, who's our director of the ALS Association of the DC, Maryland, Virginia chapter, and Matt Solomon, who's with us, who's our manager of government and community relations, who continue to do a great job of serving those in our community. It was not too long ago, pre-COVID, that I actually saw Jay in the office in Rockville having a meeting there with other patients. And so certainly the great work of the association continues, and the support continues. I know even in the midst of COVID, still outreaching to patients and giving them the services that they need. And special shout out to our Health and Human Services Department, Mr. County Executive. It's great to see that they are working with residents to make sure that for those that are homebound, we can go to them and vaccinate them with the COVID vaccine. All of those things are incredibly important. So, Sydney, do you want to go ahead and read the proclamation and we can alternate with the county executive?
It's fine with me. I should start?
I'll actually start. Yep. Whereas ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a progressive neurodegenerative illness, leaving people unable to walk, talk, eat, and finally to breathe. And
Mark, you want to go next? Do you want me to?
You.
Okay. And, whereas approximately 20,000 Americans, including 50 county residents, are living with ALS, with 5,000 Americans receiving an ALS diagnosis each year. And the United Nations has projected that the number of ALS cases in the developed world will increase by 69% over the next 25 years. And
whereas ALS can strike a person of any gender, age, religion, and race, and this is a service-related disease, military veterans are twice as likely to be diagnosed, and care can cost over $250,000 a year. And
whereas the ALS Association, DC, Maryland, Virginia chapter works to discover treatments and a cure for ALS, and to serve, advocate for, and empower people affected by ALS to live their lives to the fullest. And
whereas the organization provides access to ALS multidisciplinary clinics, as well as free of charge home visits, equipment, loan closets, transportation grants, and monthly support groups. And
whereas the organization's Esther Lerner Brenner ALS Assistive Technology Lab in Rockville is working to open new doors for people living with ALS, allowing them to reclaim their voices and live more independently.
Now, therefore, do we, Mark Elrich, our county executive, Sydney Katz, and myself, as county council members of Montgomery County, Maryland, do hereby proclaim May 2021 as ALS Awareness Month, and be it further resolved that the county executive and county council encourages residents to adopt the ALS Association DC, Maryland VA chapter core values of compassion, integrity, and urgency to find a cure and create a world without ALS. Let me now turn to our director of the ALS Association for the DC, Maryland, Virginia chapter, Lynn Aronson.
Well, good morning, and thank you to Councilmember Katz, Rice, Tucker, and County Executive Mark Elrich. We certainly appreciate this proclamation very much. I also want to recognize the council for their generosity in allowing us to have a grant during the COVID crisis to maintain our level of service to our patients and caregivers, family members. We, just like many other organizations, had to pivot to serve our clients in a different way in a virtual world, but we continued the great service and programs that we are known for. You mentioned several of them in the proclamation. We just recently completed a new strategic plan with some very lofty goals. Our overarching goal is by 2030, we want to make ALS a livable disease instead of a fatal disease. Not unlike AIDS, when it first came out, people were dying in masses. It's now very manageable. And we want to do whatever it takes to accomplish that. So in moving forward, we have adapted to the current virtual world. Hopefully sooner than later, we'll be able to see our patients and caregivers in person. But nonetheless, we recognize one thing is that our telemedicine has become so critical to our patients. They're seeing all of their clinicians and neurologists in a virtual setting. And one thing we have started this year is providing spirometers, which are devices that measure someone's breathing capabilities. As somebody progresses with the disease, breathing becomes more and more difficult. So one of the things we're working on is to provide spirometers so that patients can be able to give their breathing capabilities to the clinicians on a monthly basis. And that's a very critical part of virtual care that's not being met right now. That's one thing. Another thing that we're trying to do is a very generous donor created a fund called JT's Angel Fund. And we are providing reimbursable grants up to $5,000 for patients and families to pay for cost of living items. As was mentioned in the proclamation, it's a very expensive disease. Lots of equipment, lots of care is needed, and it can cost a family upwards of $250,000 a year. So we're trying to, we're doing this in parts of Virginia, and we want to be able to provide that throughout our entire chapter territory. Also, we do fund, we are the largest private funder of ALS research in the country. They're making great strides. More and more research is going into the pipeline. And if you know anything about the development of a drug, many go in and not very many come out the other end. So we want to put more research into the pipeline so that hopefully something positive will come out, and we're starting to see that. We also do a lot of advocacy. Currently, and Matt is the person responsible in our chapter for our federal advocacy. We're about to have our virtual advocacy day next month. And we will have patients and family members speak to Congress, promoting things like last year, we were able to waive the 5-month waiting period for SSDI to kick in. Before that, we were responsible as an organization for reducing the waiting period to 24 months. But the reality is many patients can't wait 5 months for their benefits to kick in because this disease often takes 12 to 18 months just to get a diagnosis. There is no one test that definitively, it's not like you can do a blood test or any kind of specific test. So sometimes it's process of elimination. And by the time they get their diagnosis, they're often in need of items and services. So we were able to, through our advocacy efforts, to eliminate that last year. And we expect that we will work on other projects moving forward. And of course, our patient services programs are paramount. We look forward to being able to do home visits soon. We have numerous support groups throughout our area. They've all gone virtual for now. Again, it's something we long to see our patients and family members in person. In June, we're going to be having a caregiver educational program. Caregivers are often the unsung heroes in this disease. It can be a 24/7 process for them. And so they need support as well. So on behalf of the organization, I want to thank you very much for recognizing May as ALS Awareness Month. And thank you for all you do to help residents of Montgomery County.
Well, thank you very much, Lynn. And to Jay, we are standing right by your side along the fight. We will continue to be there for you, sir. We love you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Council President Hooker, Mr. Katz, thank you, Executive Elrich, much appreciated. Thank you very much. And we always remember Steve Goldstein, our dear friend. Thank you.
Mr. President, back to you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much. That was really a wonderful proclamation. It was very nice to see you all.